Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on BetOnline's $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the games are over, head to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now at your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today, and keep an eye out for State of State apparel coming soon. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. I'm Tom Hannafin. Justin King is back with us. Today, we're taking the proverbial deep dive into what went down this past weekend between Penn State and Bowling Green. Now, while the number 8 Nittany Lions did manage to get the win by a score of 34-27 against MAC opponent Bowling Green at home, it still left a really bad taste in the mouth of a lot of Penn State fans, a lot of surprise considering the way that Bowling Green played in that game. All credit to the way Bowling Green came out firing in that first half. But there were some things that were illuminated that while, yes, Penn State did a lot of things right offensively, defensively, some concerns, able to put the clamps down in the second half. We're going to take an opportunity to really do a deep dive as to what happened in this game now that Penn State sits at 2-0 going into their first of 2 bye weeks in the 2024 season. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications. You can get at us on social media at State of State Pod. And if you can comment in our YouTube channel section, we really, really appreciate that. Speaking of YouTube, if you want to become a member of our YouTube channel, now is the perfect time to do so. You'll get all upcoming episodes of State of State ad-free for just 99 cents a month. That's exclusive for our YouTube members. You can hit the join button on our homepage, or you can follow the link in the description of this podcast. Before we go any further, I do need to offer an apology and a correction for something I mentioned in our last show, talking about tweets that I thought had been put out by Zakee Wheatley Jr. They were instead put out by Zakee Wheatley Sr., drawing attention to some of the inaccuracies and his disagreement with the way Pro Football Focus was rating his son and other players, especially defensive backs. So my apologies to Zakee Wheatley Sr. and Jr. For that discrepancy and for that mistake. That being said, looking at the Bowling Green game, didn't have a chance to chat with you immediately after the game, but now that we've both had some time to really process it, I'm curious what your macro perspective was on this game.
It's always good to get a win at home, and especially with some level of perseverance from just playing from behind, right? Like they didn't falter or do anything of that nature. And kudos to Bowling Green. So the thing about Scott Leffler is I always thought he was a very great coach from the standpoint of play calling and putting you off balance, finding matchups. I mean, he was offensive coordinator at Michigan when I was a freshman. I mean, whether it's like the out and up that Mario Manningham ran against us, the timing that he did, and just different positions that she puts you in as a defensive player, he was always very good at that. Him being the head coach, understanding that he has some nice transfers. I'm giving the synopsis of, I think Bowling Green's a little bit better than we thought they were.
Yes.
From the standpoint of that, they executed. So first, I want to say hats off to them, because I don't necessarily think Penn State played bad. They didn't play up to where they were last the week before, but just they came out slow and persevered and got through a home victory. But I mean, I take a scale back. You got to make plays when the plays are there. Again, I have a tendency of scaling out when things like this happen. I see NIU beat Notre Dame, and my tension goes
Weird
down.
weekend.
A weird weekend. I mean, across college football, because week ones with high emotional levels going across. I mean, you have to, as a human being, just as a football player, it's an emotional game, and you're coming into the next week. So you've seen that happen across the board. I'm just happy we came out with the W. And again, I really do not believe we just played like a game. I think it was just Bowling Green played well, came back out, got the W, and move on to the next one.
And I agree with you that the ability to persevere, overcome adversity, overcome a deficit, and come back and win from behind, that's a good trait for any team to have and to learn. And if you're going to learn it, you might as well learn it against a MAC opponent in September, right before bye week. So a good opportunity to learn that lesson. I agree with you on that. I was alarmed at the way the defense played in the first half. And you have worked with this coaching staff. You've worked with James Franklin. And I know there were a lot of people on social media losing their minds over this game, saying that, well, this is typical James Franklin. There's an inconsistency between opponent to opponent. There was the quote by now West Virginia defensive back, former Northwestern defensive back, Garnett Hollis Jr., that you and I talked about, is that Penn State doesn't respect anybody that is not Ohio State or Michigan. And that quote was ringing in my ears as I was watching the first half of this game, because it felt like Penn State underestimated and maybe disrespected Bowling Green in the first half. Defensively, I was very surprised at the poor arm tackling, the way the defensive backs really struggled. Hats off to Connor Bazelak, and as you mentioned, Coach Leffler, the way that he was calling plays, it was just outstanding. But this defense got burned in the first half in a way that you look at the other teams on Penn State's schedule, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Wisconsin, to name a few, Illinois as well, who played exceptionally well this past weekend. I just named 5 opponents who can exploit you in similar ways, if not far worse. That's what was concerning to me within the first half. Do you agree or disagree with those concerns?
Again, I go from the player personnel standpoint. Just even from a player, no, I don't think that matters at all. Just because someone gets beat on a play against a MAC opponent, and like if you don't respect them or whatever the reason may be, like you're playing a position where you typically lose. So like if it happens against a team that has a transfer receiver from Auburn, like getting under the skin, it's like I don't think all their players were just Bowling Green level players coming out of high school. Like you got some talented guys, and they drew up things where it's 1-on-1. You get beat from a physical standpoint. Yes, I don't like the arm tackling and the missed tackles, but I also feel like they showed that they're able to do that in week 1. So like having an off day or a slip in intensity when you're coming off a week 0 type of thing or away game, high emotions, and coming back home, like, in just football, like that's somewhat fundamental. Like there's been times where Alabama's blown someone out and had a close game against UAB. It happens, right? And I mean, again, I enjoyed the perseverance of pushing through. Again, you want them to play better, but like they've shown that they can. So like I don't put too much into, I just don't put too much into that, like, to be completely honest. If it was like yeah, I don't know. There was just some sloppy stuff in there, but like from the standpoint of the game, I found myself saying like, "Oh, that's a good move." Like, "Oh, that's a good route." Like, "Oh, that's a good play call." Like I found myself saying that more than being like disgusted and angry, which I typically get at situations like, "Oh, that was good throw and good catch." You know what I mean? And that sometimes happened because I'm sure Bowling Green was much more up to play Penn State than Penn State was to play Bowling Green, right? So I think that the level of championship composure in the sense of like dominating your opponent that you're better than, maybe they haven't done that, but like it's still week 2 and it's a long season. So that's how my brain works, just looking at it. I mean, maybe it'd be different if they lost.
The more I watched back the film, the more that I came to the conclusion that Bazelak is probably going to play himself on the NFL rosters for a while. Is he going to be a starter? But like, no, he could be a dude that hangs around the league for a while. any level of professional football, to that matter, CFL, UFL, whatever you want to call it. Fannin, the tight end, he will play on Sundays. Excellent athlete. So there were guys here and there that you're like, okay, they have some dudes, which was surprising. What was surprising to me was Penn State's defensive line getting pushed around in that first half. That was surprising. I think the way that they played against West Virginia, again, that's the issue, I think, with all of this, is that you saw Jekyll and Hyde from week 1 to week 2, and I'm not sure what the difference was in the way the defensive backs struggled against the pass and the way the defensive line really was getting overpowered and moved off their spots by Bowling Green's offensive line.
Yeah, right. When you're playing against teams like that, you want to just be physically dominant across the board. But again, I don't know. I didn't see too many things like that obviously contradict week 1, but the fact that once I see that someone can do it, now it's just a matter of tightening it up. Now, if it's just if it was like last year, we saw something week 1, it becomes a question mark in week 2, then becomes a question mark in week 3. Now I'm questioning if they can even do it. The fact that they've shown that they can do it, now we're just dealing with, or I'm evaluating just the emotional level of this human being. Like, they're able to do it. So at that point, now it's coaching, the opponent, everything that comes along with that. Does that mean there's some level of coaching that comes into that because they're chiefly responsible for the emotions and the execution of the team? Sure. But it's still week 2, and they all prove that they can do those different things. I mean, it's football. Guys are competing, so maybe this is the player in me, but yeah, it's week 2 and we won.
The positives to take away from this, I thought Drew Aller showed poise and ultimately was a big reason why Penn State did come back. You can look at his statistics and say, oh, they're not eye-popping. I think it was 13 of 20 for about 200 yards. The rushing touchdown early, that's that element of his game that he's clearly added during the offseason that is going to be so valuable in key moments for Penn State, just to be able to rush for a first down, gain some critical yards to give you more manageable situations on the next down, or even rush for a touchdown like that, just keep the defense guessing. That was really valuable, the way that he hung in there and he continuously pushed Penn State forward as the game went on. And he was under duress a good amount during this game. I will give credit to Bowling Green's defensive line and the way that they were calling their defensive packages in the second half. They were putting a lot of odd fronts in front of Drew Aller to have to dissect. And there was one, I think it was somewhere in the third or the fourth quarter, deep in Bowling Green territory on a third down play where he dropped back to pass, and it looked like 7 guys from Bowling Green were coming, and instead 3 guys dropped back into coverage after taking 1 or 2 steps forward. That's something an NFL quarterback would struggle with, because when you see 7 come at you, 1 step, 2 step, then 3 drop back, now your brain is like, I got to get out of here. He was trying to cover up. He wasn't even thinking about throwing the ball, nor would any reasonable quarterback or person be doing that. It's self-preservation at that point. So I was very impressed by his ability to keep moving forward, because you may have seen last year him being in situations like that, probably against better competition, him being a little shell-shocked. It didn't feel that way. He took some hits, he took some sacks, but he just kept on moving forward in this game. And it doesn't hurt when your 2 running backs both go over 100 yards on the ground. And this is the element of Andy Kotelnicki's offense, Justin, that we've been so excited to see, is that the consistent thread between West Virginia and the Bowling Green game is balance offensively, run and pass.
And that's where I'm getting to, where I think that stables my angst of being competitive against Bowling Green, because there's a level of identity that we saw that they stuck to. It didn't falter. It's like you see someone in a fight that's losing, and like the champion's losing or the rope-a-dope. It's like, oh, boom, 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 and it comes back. So you have faith that they're able to execute at a different level. And I say that to say, it's the identity of a team. Like, I don't think the first 2 games last year when Drew played, whether statistically it was much better, more splash plays, like, I don't think we felt the same way week 2. Like, he got through a persevering win against Bowling Green, had fun for 11 for 17, very efficient. He felt like he could make plays. The thing that I think we're starting to what you articulated was that fan, that emotional investment that we spoke to last year, Mr. Mike Portman.
Yes.
And because like now you're starting to trust and believe like this is our guy. Like we saw it last week where he was moving, he was doing different things. All right, it's a tough match. He performed under pressure. He was able to make the different reads and get us through, which is the main identity of a high level quarterback or somebody that you can win deep into the season with. So for them to show those two different dynamics in week 1 and week 2, to me, I'm checking boxes like, okay, they have this. Like, and if they don't do it all the time, it's just like, all right, and that's where the coaching comes in and they get better as the season goes. Guys rotate in, you play better than you don't. It's 2 new games in a row. I have a lot of different reasons from a player standpoint, but being able to see the dichotomy and the identity that they didn't shift from, like they didn't seem like in this game, they were like, all right, now we're just going to launch it here. It's like, no, we're going to do what we do. And
was no Chuck and Chief, thank God. Like there were deep passes, but there was no
deep passes,
like,
but
Hail
it
Mary.
was within rhythm though. It was within rhythm and within their identity. Like that's kind of what I'm saying, even from the standpoint of keeping them off balance. Like that's when I watched the game, I felt we were going to win. Like I felt like, all right, we're going to come back and win just based on how they were moving the ball. Like sometimes last year, like when we had those things, I was like, I don't know. Even when we did win, it was that feeling like I didn't feel like we were going to win. Like I still had that feeling. And with that, like those are like those thread lines where I see with a team where it's like, okay, they're malleable, but they can still win. They can do different things. We play, I take it back to 05, which I'm trying to compare this team to a lot. But when we played Northwestern, they weren't a good of a team, right? We played, I don't know, Minnesota. We played somebody and smacked them where we weren't supposed to be that good. And we played them down to the wire and we're like, oh, they're not that good. But what that game did to us was, one, we looked at Mike Robertson like, oh, this is our leader. Like he didn't have the best game. He threw interceptions. But after that game, it was like, we got full, complete trust in that guy. When me and Derek made different plays, the team was like, okay, we could trust these guys when things are bad. The fact that those guys continue to trust each other and play and get out of the game with a W, I think that's going to, do a nice little skyrocket in week 3. Obviously, bye week and then Kent State. But
yeah, game 3. That is such a great comparison. I think that moment of adversity, yes, you play down to your opponent, but it's a lesson learned and hopefully moving forward to bigger and better things. We have to talk about Tyler Warren.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was the record, the most receiving yards in a single game for a Penn State tight end, 146 yards. I mean, he was just there. You've heard James Franklin say he's the most complete tight end in America. It's one thing to hear from the coaching staff, and then when you see it play out, and now that we've watched 2 weeks of college football, I struggle to come up with a tight end in college football right now that is better than Tyler Warren, period.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, last year there weren't many either. Yeah, I mean, so like when you say that and you kind of watch, like, yeah, he's a dude. I mean, Penn State had Pat Fryermuth just signed a big deal in the NFL. We've had a nice run with the aces and the tight end from talent acquisition, development, and deployment. I mean, Mike Gesicki starting it off, but like that is a position for Penn State that I think they can continue to lean into and evaluate and get the best tight ends, because that is a key critical position in football. When we think about the spreading of the offenses, those mismatches in between the field, we have to play nickel backs versus those, those hybrid tight ends that can make you miss, but also block. You're running a game, like the diversity that he presents is an NFL, like you said, an NFL type of tight end. And that gives you like that safety blanket when those things are happening, not having much room on the outside. Like, hey, we got a tight end that can go for $140. That's again in that identity or that complementary identity of the run game that we're talking about and with Kotelnicki. So when we're seeing those things come alive, and again, in my brain, I'm looking at the offense like, okay, how many ways can they attack us and beat us? Well, like we can't necessarily stop the run. Damn, we can't stop their bread and butter things. Right? Like they can make a mistake. Those are the scariest teams to play. Jim Harbaugh's teams were like that. It's like, I used to hate playing the 49ers. Like there was just a way, like you knew what they were going to do. Like shuffle, motion the guy down. You got to run the ball. Frank Gore, like they're going to do the same thing. He did the same thing here, did the same thing there. And it's like when you have those identities, it brings confidence to the players. It brings results, everything. to the forefront. I mean, I feel like that was the main theme of last year, is us questioning the identity of the squad and the offense.
The identity feels very clear on offense. I'm curious to see how the defense rebounds. I'll give them a ton of credit. The second half, it was night and day. And I come back to some of the comments of James Franklin during training camp, is that he had talked about how early in training camp, there would be whole periods of play where the offense was more dominant and then the defense was more dominant. And he said by the end of camp that got more even. You didn't see those inconsistencies. Well, unfortunately, this was a game where you did see those inconsistencies on both sides of the ball. Offense was doing great in the first half and got stymied a little bit in the second half. Defense really struggled in the first half. Second half, gave up less than 100 yards and 3 points and took away the ball twice through the air with Tony Rojas and the aforementioned Zakee Wheatley Jr. So that's a interesting turn. And I'm curious, because you've been in those locker rooms at halftime with James Franklin. How do you think that went at halftime of the Bowling Green game?
I don't think there's not a reason to again yell, like wake up, do anything. Like, the players care, right? It's somewhere like probably at that moment reminding them who they are. Like, we're going to stick to the script. We're not changing. We played the worst half of football that we played, and we're down by X amount of points. Keep playing your game, wake the F up, and like, let's go. Like, I don't think there's anything to change, right? It's like shanking a drive off the first tee. If you know how to hit the ball or why you did it, it's like you correct it and you do it again. But if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you start playing the golf, you're just trying to changing your mode, you're doing everything because you don't know exactly what you're doing. That's how I look at this. Like, oh, it's like a nice little slice, correct it, get aligned, take a deep breath, get in rhythm, and strike the ball. Like, that's how I think his speech went.
Another point that was raised by a lot of Penn State fans was Abdul Carter's play against Bowling Green. I would say, having watched back the tape now multiple times, he had more of an effect, I think, on this game than he did West Virginia. However, plenty of people saying, well, when are we going to see the quote unquote menace that people have been talking about since training camp, since he converted from linebacker to defensive end? And I think, Justin, there's maybe this syndrome or perception of Penn State fans is that because he switched to defensive end overnight, he's going to be what Micah Parsons is right now for the Dallas Cowboys, that monster, unblockable defensive end. And I continue to have to remind myself, and I think about this when I watch him, is that he's played 2 games as a defensive end in major college football. And the way that you watch him be utilized by Tom Allen, they're still dropping him into select plays where he's playing like an outside linebacker, where he's dropping into zone, where he's playing the option. He's not necessarily being asked to rush the passer every single play. I think it's a difference of expectation versus his learning curve, and also the way that they're utilizing him. I think he's yet to have his best game. He's been disruptive, but I think there's just this expectation that it's going to be flipping a switch and he's going to just destroy people all season long. Here's the other thing. I look at his build compared to the rest of the defensive line. He's the smallest guy out there by a lot, and he's going up against left tackles that have had success against him. So is it a situation where it's like, hey, maybe we need to move him around a little bit more so it's more unpredictable for the offensive line? I don't know. What do you see with Abdul?
First, I mean, just because him and Michael were 11, I think people need to understand that they're completely different athletes, right? I mean, Abdul is actually a little bit bigger than Micah. Micah's like a 4'3" guy, though. Like, so when we think about like the speed that we see Micah play with, like, he's a different animal. I don't even think we understand what we had at Penn State when we had him. But I'm saying that to say, like, Abdul Carter, him making that transition, this is a natural move from a guy with his size and ability. Like you say, he's been causing havoc different areas, but playing the defense end position, there's different fact patterns that he has to recognize. Whether he's trying to keep containing, you're saying that they're dropping him back in coverage. We played West Virginia and Bowling Green. There's still areas where he's learning the defense from a defensive end standpoint, and a new defense being Coach Allen's, where they're trying to do different things, different disguises. I can't necessarily be sure, so I'm not in the rooms, but I know when Manny was there, it was like obviously more attack. And like, he's probably figuring out how to play the position. I mean, again, not to bring myself, I was number one corner. I got beat like the first time I played corner in college, and it was like it's the first time, but I was expected to be good, right? Because of the measurements and how I played. So when I watch him, he causes disruption, but when you get to that point of attack at that third to fourth level of the pyramid, that comes with like actual game reps, regardless of how special of an athlete you are. So I don't like, again, Micah Parsons, Saquon. A lot of times Penn State fans have seen some generational athletes where we think, hey, that person's supposed to be just like this. And it's like, no, like that's a 1 in 20-year type of player. And that's what Micah and Saquon were. So when we compare guys to them from an athletic standpoint, just recognize that, yeah, they're a little bit different. And this is the natural progression. And he's been doing a pretty solid job for the first 2 weeks of playing defensive end.
I think his best games are ahead of him. You would have expected against Bowling Green lesser competition, and potentially that expectation is there for Kent State, that he would be just dominating right out of the gates. It didn't shock me that he did not do that against West Virginia. You saw him get involved and be disruptive against Bowling Green, but that big breakout game, I think people pay attention to sacks and forced fumbles, all those sorts of stuff, and he's been in the mix for those sorts of things. But his best game, I feel, is ahead of him. And again, watching the tape back multiple times, I saw instances where he was asked to be a threat, but also drop back into weak side zone and cover the flat. So it's like, yeah, he's still got those linebacker responsibilities and instincts that I'm not saying they're fighting each other or anything, but he's being asked to do some different things. And I think that's extremely valuable for his maturation. Hats off to Zane Durant, who, not to come back to Pro Football Focus, but they have him graded as Penn State's highest graded defender in the first 2 weeks of play. And he is a guy who, Justin, we talk about so many people on this defensive line, and Matt Millen was singing his praises. He was calling him a squatty potty like the entire game. And it's like, yeah, he's 6'1", but he's pushing nearly 300 pounds. And he is a force in the middle of the defense. And there is proven to be better depth at defensive tackle than I think we anticipated coming into this season. Devon J. Thomas looks the part, is playing the part very well. You're seeing Alonzo Ford out there quite a bit from Old Dominion, and he's a guy that the coaching staff has said it's going to take him a minute, but he's a guy who can develop into a starter. He's getting a lot of reps. You see the platooning between the first and second string defensive line getting out there so that they're fresh when they're playing. I continue to be impressed by the interior of the defensive line. In the first half against Bowling Green, not so much. Jamal Johnson gutting this team for a 41-yard rushing touchdown. Not great, but this team, again, rebounded in the second half. Defensive line has been very, very solid. You know, again, tale of two halves with Bowling Green, but I'm encouraged by what I've seen. What do you think?
I'm encouraged as well. I mean, my thing with football teams in general, whether I'm evaluating a player, coach, whole operation, again, I always lean back into that identity and how much do they believe in it. Because when the road gets shaky, like that's what players, coaches are going to lean on. And I am liking the makeup or the structure of Penn State's football team through the first 2 weeks, regardless of how close the Bowling Green game was. For me, it was just a different checkpoint of, okay, they have some grit, even when they come out a little flat. Like you're not going to be at 100% every single week. You're not going to execute at premium rates every single time, but can you win? Like, can you like stick to what you do better than them and punch them in the mouth? And I think at the end of the day, they did that, obviously being the better, more talented team. But again, week one, we saw what players are able to do. And it's just the fact that it was within the threat line of what they are as a football team. So, I mean, as they continue to get better and lineups level out and guys aren't rotating in, I'm sure the offensive and defensive staff were trying to get players in too. So like, I don't think we're seeing the full, or like this full army going out to play right this moment. But
right.
I like the first 2 weeks.
You certainly wouldn't see all the cards that Penn State has to play on either side of the ball at this point in the year. You're not trying to put too much on tape. You can see these little things more on the offensive side of the ball where Andy Kotelnicki's putting things on tape for teams to think about for later in the season, October, November, December, potentially, trying to get you to act on something that he hasn't completely shown his full hand on. I thought that was really interesting to see the way that he uses motion, the way that he changes up formations pre-snap. Didn't do anything too crazy. Again, it's the Dairy Queen Blizzard. It's vanilla ice cream, some candy sprinkled in. I can see exactly what he's going for. I come back to on offense, Tyler Warren has a breakout day. Trey Wallace, I misspoke on Sunday, had multiple targets, just didn't have any catches, not necessarily his fault. Was covered quite well, and hats off to Bowling Green, the way that they played defense. It's very, very encouraging to see Penn State's offense see the number one wide receiver be unavailable, I guess the way to put it. Nothing against what Trey did, just couldn't quite connect with him. So somebody else stepped up, and it was Tyler Warren in a historic way. Still waiting to see something from Liam Clifford. Still waiting to see Julian Fleming. He finally got his first catch, quick little 3-yard completion. Still want to see more from them. Omari Evans continues to show the big play ability. Could have had a touchdown and was called back. There's still so much more you can see from this offense. And a thing that was worrisome for me, the offensive line for Penn State through the day kind of had a rough day in pass protection. And that was something we were talking about in camp. And I saw a lot of different offensive linemen rotating in at multiple positions, which is great that you're getting them this experience. Drew Shelton had a tough day. The tackles had a tough day. How do you correct that? Because Bowling Green is not the best pass rush that you're going to face.
No, that's worrisome. Everything that I've been saying is like, all right, that's cool. But like, yeah, I didn't like that part. I didn't like getting pressure against
Not to laugh
Green.
at him. You're like,
yeah, that's a problem, right? So, but with that being said, these guys have to fix it. And it's good to figure out that problem in week 2 against Bowling Green instead of week 4, whiteout game, and it gets real ugly and all that good stuff. So that's a problem. How do you fix that? I'm not an offensive line coach, but no, but
send your questions to Phil Troutwine,
right? But they have to make sure that like whatever mistakes that they did make, whether it was an adjustment to blitz, making sure that you're counting out your numbers right, making sure that you're getting the depth that you need to get to, and just sticking on the fundamentals. That left tackle defensive end matchup comes down to, athletic ability. As long as it was a man-on-man type of situation and it's not a stunt situation where there was just miscounting where players and blitzes were coming from, I think those are two different situations. If it's the mental errors, all right, that's on field. Got to get guys lined up, understand what we're seeing from the blitzes and different things. I mean, sometimes it's hard week 2. You can draw up different things, and Bowling Green can throw out more blitzes or looks to probably what Penn State's trying to show. Regardless of what, you can put in more complex blocking schemes to do the number magic. Now, if it's just one-on-one tackle getting beat by a DN, we have to figure that out. Get in the weight room, nut up, get quicker, and make sure we get to our sets and protect our quarterback.
To end, Sanders Sahadak, I thought this was a good confidence-building game because the kicks that he made had stakes. It wasn't a game where you were ahead by 30 points and no real pressure. The kicks that he made were important for Penn State building the comeback that they had against Bowling Green. The West Virginia game, there were concerns coming out of that, and there were discussions in camp of like, yeah, there's a kicking battle, not quite sure who it's going to be. That was a great confidence builder for Sahadak, so I think that's good. Again, great to do that in September. Great to do that against a MAC opponent. Great to do that before a bye week, and then another opponent in Kent State that is beatable. And at this point, hopefully the lesson has been learned strongly by the entirety of the roster that you can underestimate no one on the remainder of this schedule. Hopefully that lesson's been learned here in September. Thank you all so much for joining us. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications, get at us on social media at State of State Pod, comment in our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel and get all upcoming episodes of State of State ad-free for just 99 cents a month. You can hit the join button on our home channel, or you can follow the link in the description of this podcast. Enjoy the bye week. Enjoy the weekend of college football ahead. And we'll be back in the coming days with the preview of Kent State versus Penn State in week 4. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.